we all have in a house counters, and we have stovetops, and we all under the impression that if while I'm cooking something falls from the pot into the counter, it becomes taref. It's taref over there, of course it's taref, right? Because you had over here meat and you had dairy, and many times things fell on it, and although you cleaned it, it becomes taref. And because of that, if something falls on top of that counter, you would make it taref as well. That is normally the way we would think, and it's not necessarily so. Why not? Because when you have on the counter something that falls and you clean it afterwards, let's say even if it was hot, if it was cold, you have no problem. You clean it, nothing happens, right? If it's cold, nothing happens unless it's milk that's spilled on top of the counter and it stayed there for 24 hours without cleaning. So then we use the concept called kavush kemfushal. But otherwise, you have something over here that is cold, nothing happens. So what could make it asur? If it's hot. You had a hot piece of meat that falls straight from the pot on the counter or on the stovetop. Then afterwards, you have a dairy thing that falls on it. That could make it asur, basar b'chalav. The thing is, usually when meat falls, you take it out and you clean the place. What happens when you clean the place? It still gets absorbed. But although it gets absorbed, after 24 hours, it becomes, as we explained, pagum. It's not it's eno ben yomo anymore. It's pagum. Because of that, of course, don't take right now your cheese out of your pizza out of your oven and put it right there. You put it on a plate. But if it fell in there, same dinim as we explained before, you don't have to worry about such things. So if you have such a counter, usually you don't have an issue if it's clean. If it's dirty, if the counter is dirty, you have a problem. Why? Because the concept of ben yomo, ve'eno ben yomo, does not apply to substance. It only applies to something that's absorbed into something else. As we explained before, it gets absorbed in the pot, it gets absorbed in the counter. So then you have, after 24 hours, the concept called eno ben yomo, and it becomes pagum. But if we're dealing with something that has mamashut, which means this counter had food that fell in there, it wasn't cleaned. It sits there already for 2 days. So you cooked last time chicken, meat, and it fell, and you didn't clean it, even a little bit. Sometimes it's a little bit, you don't bother. You wait for the cleaning lady to come next week, and she'll do the work. Why should you do the work? Means why it stays dirty. Now that dairy, while you're cooking dairy, pasta with cheese fell on top of that, dirt that fell that on top of the countertop of the stove, that will make it a problem. That will make that pasta, you can't take that pasta anymore and eat it. You'll have to throw it out. Otherwise, if it's clean, it doesn't make it asur. Now, a piece of pasta normally doesn't mean anything, right? Nobody cares about that. But sometimes you cook yourself a nice piece of meat. Meat costs a lot of money. You have a nice piece of meat, you cooked few pieces of meat, and one of these big pieces of meat, boom, falls on such a thing, then it's a nice amount of loss. So then the question would be more relevant.